Susan Fletch from the County Council.
Teresa Rios, EMS Agency.
Tina Nieto, Monterey Police County Chief.
Jay Robbins, Assistant Director, Council, your Worldwide Citizens Website.
Tino Riano, AMR, Animal Provider.
Gary Miller, Monterey County OES.
Let's go with Dr. Kolinsky.
Michelle Fletch.
Michael Marsh, Gastronomy County EMS Provider.
Let's take it anyway.
Sam Knowles,
Jeff Ward, Counselor.
Jim Ross and Carmel Highlands Fire.
Liz Spear from Ohio Inspired.
I'm Juliet Forster, Cypress.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Jared Bagwell, EMS Agency.
Laura Mullen, EMS Agency.
Doug McCown, Random Park.
Dave Bolcher, Alpine.
Reno de Tulio, Cal Fire.
Mike Lincoln, Pebble Beach Community Services District.
George Nunez, Cal Fire and ALS alternate.
Mike Estinger with AMR.
Scott Myrie, Salinas Fire.
Scott Hopkins, Salinas Fire.
Chelsea Scanlon, OES.
All right. Thank you for the introductions. Let's go on to public comment. Any member of the public may address the committee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes on any issue not on the committee's agenda. The EMCC will listen to all communications but may not take any action. Do we have any public comment? Sir?
Yes. I'll identify myself. I'm Dr. James Rawson. I'm a 20-year permanent resident of Carmel Highlands. We need to put some sunshine to an issue that was in the Carmel Time Code last Thursday, talking about the ambulance response in Carmel Highlands and that vicinity. I've had a flood of phone calls from upset residents talking about the decrease in emergency response, that we will not be getting ambulances from the city of Carmel or Carmel Valley in the proposed RFP. I've understood the problem, and I've been very happy to tell people, call 911. We have paramedics on our engines. They will come quickly. 1 in 3 ambulances will respond to you very quickly. And all of a sudden, I'm becoming a liar if this occurs. And I think I should remind all people of Monterey County and this committee that Carmel Highlands has the highest retail, residential sales price of homes in this area. Subsequently, people are paying the highest property tax, supporting this group and all of Monterey County. And then we can expand that further to Carmel Point, City of Carmel, and Pebble Beach, also included. What we're concerned with is decrease in response times also. I've been the president of the Carmel Highlands Association. I've been the president of the Carmel Highlands Fire Board, presently on the board, and I represent 800 people living in Carmel Highlands, and I want to make sure that they're well represented in this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. Is there any other public comment? That said, let's move on to item number 3, approval of the January EMCC meeting minutes.
Approval with one change. It shows Harold was present, and he was not present for that meeting.
Okay,
Hey, I have a comment also, please.
please tell us, yes.
Okay, so I don't actually have the printed out thing, I'm just looking at it on my phone, so I'm not sure which page it is. But there is a section after comments about Chief Panholzer, it starts with my name. It says, Gary Millay added that this is not the first time he hears this discussion. He asks why this body has not made a motion to satisfy the concern, et cetera, et cetera. And actually what I said was, this is not the first time that I've heard this issue, that the fire chief's concerns are not being addressed, and that nobody seems to be concerned about what their issues are. And then I asked why a motion hasn't been made. So that part was left out. And then your statement that you reminded the committee that they cannot vote because it's not on the agenda, but that you surely can make this as part of the next agenda, but I do not see it on the agenda. So I know that this board body has the ability to add agenda items if it's approved by everybody.
Yes.
So I don't know if you wanted to do that or not.
I don't know that we can add anything to.
Yes, you can.
At this moment, we can?
Yes, you can. Brown Act allows you to do that.
Susan Blanch, County Council, you cannot talk about anything that's not on the agenda.
You can add last-minute agenda items if they were inadvertently left off. You ought to research the Brown Act and ask and see what that says.
My advice to this body is to stick to the agenda. And if-
Okay, so then, my question is, who makes up the agenda? Because I want to talk to them about this exclusion that I've been asking for months to have on the agenda.
Yeah, and it goes to say that if there was a motion, what would it be? And we didn't get to that motion.
Certainly, this body can decide to put something on the next meeting agenda, but at this point, there's no notice of whatever. I missed what topic we want to talk about, but if it's not on the agenda, my advice is that we cannot talk
Okay, so
about it.
who creates the agenda for this body then? I'm sorry?
The EMS agency does.
Can you speak up some? We can't hear that.
So who specifically would I talk to to make sure that the wording gets corrected for the next agenda?
So,
I'm sorry, are you a committee member or are you?
I'm ex officio. That's why I can't make that motion.
right,
Understand. So you can
so,
make that public comment, and if this body wants to put something on the agenda, they can direct the chair or ask the chair to do so in the next meeting.
so I think there's two things we're discussing right now is the correction of the minutes, which I think we are doing as we speak, right? And then the second thing is to follow up with a specific motion that will be put on the next agenda. And I think I need clarity on what that specific item is, and then I also need to defer to you as when the correct time to make that motion would be.
We are in approval of the minutes right now. Certainly at the end of the meeting or during announcements, the chair can entertain
Okay.
putting something on whatever that item is on the
Well,
next agenda.
We do not have a good of the order. There's no
Right.
vehicle to bring that in, but I think that perhaps we are remiss if there's an issue here that needs to be addressed. We
Right.
need to find a way to get that issue on before us at the next
And what I'm
meeting.
hearing is that there has been a request from the chair to put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and she's going to do that.
It's now the time to make that motion.
I would do it under new business personally.
Under new business or
Announcements.
Yeah.
announcements, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Normally, it doesn't take a motion to put something on the agenda. Normally, a committee member can ask.
In the past, I have made a recommendation, I don't recall if it was a motion, formal motion, to
Right.
get items on the next agenda. And I think in some instances, we were able to get the items on the current meeting in progress.
That, in my opinion, would violate the Brown Act because it is not, it's a substantive discussion of something that has not been on, that is not on the agenda that was posted to the public.
Okay, the substantive issue here is, to me, is we have an issue that needs to be discussed before this board, pursuant to perhaps a recommendation going forward to the board. The vehicle to do that is in the announcements, as you're saying.
It can be done, since we're digressing, I certainly think you can ask the chair right now if that can be put on the agenda, and the chair can place that on the agenda.
I think, just Madam Chair, if I may make a comment, that some of this seems to be an urgency. If we wait till the next EMCC meeting, there's some major components that are occurring right now, and I think the stakeholders want to have some input, I think, to what Terry's point is. So would it be appropriate that even if we have to call for a special EMCC meeting, it's a 24-hour notice under the Brown Act, that we can get these concerns vetted so the public, much like we're here, that who we work for, has the ability to weigh in on some of the concerns of the community and stakeholders.
I agree with that. The question is can we wait another two months for the next meeting? The function is an urgency.
And so I agree with and appreciate Chief Urquidez's comment that we should request a special meeting with the specific agenda items that we're looking for. If it's okay with the committee, I'd like to get through the current agenda, and at the end of the meeting during announcements, come up with those agenda items that we would like to have on that special meeting. Okay.
So 4/5 vote right now will not add an urgency item? That's what I'm hearing for the
In my
record.
opinion, it does not meet the qualification for an emergency meeting.
But you just admitted you don't even know what the agenda item, what the topic is.
There, I can read from the bylaws what an emergency meeting is if you would like.
No, not an emergency meeting, an emergency action. Sounds like
Right, and
there's emergency action. I didn't know how emergency was, I don't care about that, but the Brown Act does say you can add emergency items if it meets the qualifications.
I don't think it does. And I can read the bylaws too, if you like, about emergency, for urgency it matters. I do not believe that you need that qualification.
I don't know what the issue is, so I
Yeah.
don't know if it meets it or not.
When I read the minutes, we were talking about the difference between medical authority or administrative authority and operational authority. That's what this issue is about. So, anyway, can we,
Emergency meeting would have to be in the department.
I think I agree with the process today. To get to the agenda prior to calling for an adjournment, that I think we really, if we're not happy with what we hear today, then we would ask for an emergency meeting to be held
A
properly.
special
Special
meeting.
meeting. And then I think everybody here,
yeah.
strong intent of, then we just have a single item that we'll be dealing with.
Okay.
So let me just ask one question then legally, since I'm not an attorney. It's your legal opinion that even though in the minutes it's documented that the chair said we can make sure this item is added to the next agenda, meeting agenda, and it's not, that's not something you can add now with the
It was
vote of the
not
board?
put on the agenda that was posted to the public, so it was my opinion that we cannot have substantive discussion about something that is not posted to the agenda.
And in all fairness, I wasn't exactly clear on what the agenda, we asked for specifically what the agenda item was, and we didn't get to that during that discussion. I know there's something to be discussed, and I know we're going to come up with an agenda item. I'm not quite clear at this moment specifically what that is.
Yeah, I just think that the public, from the comments I've heard, feels like that this board is dragging their feet on this issue, and that they're, the perception is they're not willing to discuss it.
What is the issue?
Which
And I'm going to ask right now.
Let's move, yeah.
We move forward and kind of under announcements and new business, and we can ask about setting agenda items for the next meeting.
Which, so at this point, we're still on
Our special meeting.
the adoption of last meeting's minutes.
You have a motion.
Okay. And is there a second?
It was a motion with
Corrections.
Corrections.
Correction.
Corrections,
Yes.
and accepting those corrections, is there a second?
So moved with corrections.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You're going to abstain? Okay. All right. Then we're on to number 4, reports. In the packet are the draft meeting minutes for both the Medical Advisory and Operations Committee for your review. We don't intend to discuss them unless there is specific feedback from the committee. Okay?
Jody,
Yes.
I brought this up in MAC. There was a motion from the February 13th EMS Ops Subcommittee meeting that we table the EMS communications policies. It was unanimously approved. I don't see any record of that in any document.
Okay, and did you at the Ops Committee. Okay, so that's something that needs to be corrected at the Ops Committee meeting and noted here.
Sounds like we're starting to see a pattern.
Are we, so can we, will that be noted in the minutes? The comment by Eric just now?
Can I just ask you,
Can you
Yes.
speak up, please? Most of us can't hear back here.
Yeah.
Teresa, the February 13th EMS Ops Subcommittee, there was a motion to rescind the EMS communications policies until such time that all of the stakeholders could convene, establish a work group, and discuss the items. The motion was by myself. The second, I believe, was by David Jednick from Carmel Fire Ambulance. And by the members present, it was unanimously approved. I'd just like to know where that went.
what I'm understanding is that this happened at Ops.
That's correct, which is canceled for today.
Frank, could you speak to that?
Yeah, the motion is in the minutes. It's the second paragraph in the minutes under old business.
Okay.
So is that what you're talking about?
Yes, what's the outcome?
It says, the outcome, you're right, that's not in the minutes, but basically I think the minutes reflect that the motion was made. It says motion made on communications policies, a motion by E. Welling and seconded by D. Jednack to suspend 3,000 policies and to establish a work group to establish dispatch policy language. Passed unanimously. Policies in question are 3,000, 3,010, 3,030, 3,040, and 3,050.
Okay,
So it's in the minutes.
so that's going to be addressed at the next EMS Ops meeting?
Well, that I don't know. That's, I think, what we're trying to figure out.
All right, we're on to 5, old business, and first is the data system, and it looks like, Fred, you're the
Yeah. So,
Order.
as I talked about at the MAC meeting, I think the staff report is fairly self-explanatory. A few things that I want to highlight from that report. One, you'll see the table that shows the number of agencies that are integrated into the ESO system. There are a lot of them. We have a handful of agencies that are not integrated into the system, and we're continuing to work that issue in various ways. The second thing is we are going to meet on Tuesday with the County Health Information Exchange, the HIE, called Central Coast Health Connect. EMS agency staff and health IT staff will meet with them to determine if it's a good idea for us to try to integrate that ESO system into the county HIE. And it was interesting at our MAC meeting this morning that we heard a couple of facilities say, you know, that system doesn't really work all that well yet. So that's one of the things that we want to explore, whether that would be a good fit for what we're trying to do with our ESO data system with regard to getting outcome data back on our EMS patients. If we decide not to go the HIE route, the other alternative, which I think we've discussed before at various meetings, is a health data exchange, which would be more of a bi-directional flow of data and information between field providers and hospitals. The idea being that we would get outcome data back from the hospitals to us. So we should have a much better idea after we meet with them and get a better handle on their technical specifications, costs, all that sort of thing, whether or not that would be a good fit for us. Just as some background, ESO has hundreds and hundreds of HDE connections around the country between EMS systems and hospital systems. They have maybe a few dozen HIE connections. So it's a relatively new thing for them too. And they also want to be in on that discussion when we determine whether or not that will be beneficial to what we're trying to do with our data system here. The third thing, which is not in the report, but which is something that we're going to do, is we're going to bring ESO back to Monterey County, hopefully in early April, to do 2 training sessions, one for the EMS agency and one for the EPCR data work group, where we're going to get them to show us how to use the analytics functions and the reporting functions of the system more efficiently. We recognized after the system went online and we had lots of records to look at that we could use some more tutoring, basically, in how to use a lot of those reporting and analytics functions. So not only would it be beneficial for EMS agency staff, I think it would be beneficial for the provider agencies that are out there and new to ESO. So we'll have an all-day ESO person here in county, and hopefully that person can help both the agency and provider agencies out with tuning us up and getting us better up to speed on how to use the system more efficiently. Do you have any questions?
Brett, just the question I have, and for us that choose not to use ESO under the county's umbrella, I think we've communicated a couple attempts now with the county to know what data fields under 1797-227 that you need. And I'd almost recommend that to be some type of policy. There's several EPCR vendors out there. That way, we have clear leader's intent from the EMS agency and Dr. Stubblefield of what parameters do you need. So when folks are shopping or putting bids together for those services, we know we're meeting your needs with clear intent that it has to integrate. But we need to have those vendors, they need to know what fields that you need populated so we can do that. The challenge that we have is that we know that the county, we've given full access to our PCR system since 2013. But what our attorneys are saying, listen, you have billing information in there that is not subject to 227 because we bill through that with our ambulance billing company, that there is liability to that. So we just need to know what you need so we can work with that vendor. And we're with ESO today, and we were prior to the county, but that doesn't mean in a year from now we will be. So we need to have those clear parameters so we can work with these vendors. And I think it would help, especially when we start looking at BLS transitioning to electronic patient care and other ALS providers if they so choose, that if that's in a policy, Kempsis, Nemesis, it meets everything, and I think it'll just make it easier for everybody that we know.
I think the challenge, Chief, is that when we talk with ESO, in order for us to have basically the 2 things that we need out of your data, one, to be able to look at an individual PCR, for an investigation or a quality improvement effort or whatever, and also to be able to aggregate your data into the data in the overall data system. The only way to do that they could describe to me was that you have to be in the umbrella system in some way. And so to give you an example, what we've done with the other providers who chose not to get ESO, a couple other departments, for example, use emergency reporting. And so what that vendor did with ESO was they created a system whereby their PCRs could make their way into our system so that we would have access to their data, and it created sort of a facsimile of their patient care report so that we could look at their patient care reports also. We also did that with a vendor that uses ImageTrend. We're working with another agency right now that uses a system called EMS Charts. So they're doing that same kind of integration. And basically, all of those vendors work together with ESO to try to create that system so that we get what we want. As far as the question about, billing data and that kind of thing, I'm not really sure how to answer that question. But again, I think what we've been basing our sort of strategy on is trying to get what we need out of any agency's data that will work with basically what ESO told us will work. So in other words, when we look at, say, an emergency responding PCR, we don't see currently the exact PCR that emergency responding creates, but ESO created a facsimile of that PCR that will work in their system, in our system. So we, see a PCR, it's probably not as fancy looking as the one that they see, but at least we can see the basic information that we need to see. Plus, along with that PCR comes a packet of data, which we can then integrate into the system. And I think that's the challenge, trying to figure out how that works. And the nice thing is all of those vendors are compliant, with the NEMSIS and CHEMSIS and that kind of thing. One of the issues with emergency reporting is that they have yet to go to NEMSIS 3, or they just went to NEMSIS 3. There was another one that had yet to go to NEMSIS 3. And that's why we get a facsimile rather than an exact duplicate of their PCR. So that's really the challenge that we're trying to deal with.
Thank
Does that
you,
make
Fred.
sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you and all your hard work. We know it's been a herd cats.
For sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fred, when did you say the training was going to be?
Probably early April. What we're trying to do is we have an epidemiologist hopefully starting soon. So we wanted to make sure that we could get that epidemiologist into the training also because it's going to be very, very important for them to understand how the system works. So I'll let everybody know as soon as I can, but we're looking probably early April, hopefully. If we find, and we've discussed this internally, that it's going to be a while before that epidemiologist starts, then we might schedule it anyway and see if we can get them back down for our epi once they start.
I could just make a request if we can get that information out to the providers so that you can receive feedback about what topics they would benefit from getting training on.
Sure.
That'd be very useful.
Absolutely. We'll do, I always envisioned it would be something like that, and then a good part of it would be devoted to how to use the analytics functions, the reporting functions, and that kind of thing, because most of us who are new to the system, I don't think we're using it nearly as efficiently as we can.
Okay. Moving on to EMS system performance metrics. Jared?
So a little background for folks. Back in September, we migrated from EM Resource to ReadyNet for our emergency communication drills and real-time events. We initially had the EMS dispatch perform daily drills for both the 800 megahertz system and the have-bed drills at the time. We found that those were not as functionally appropriate as an MCI drill. So as of January, we had EMS dispatch do daily MCI drills as well, and those have been proven to be much more effective to establish what our daily readiness would be. So as you can see, there are a couple facilities that still struggle with maintaining that high level of 95%, which is important, especially with, as MCIs occur, early recognition is key. And I think SVMH has struggled with some technology issues, but they are replacing their radios and dedicating computers to the ReadyNet. So I think we should see much more consistent performance with that. So unless anybody has any other questions about that, I can.
And then Fred, it looks like you are up again with the AMR dispatch and response time performance.
Right. So as we do for all of these meetings, we included some reporting on AMR's response time compliance. Dispatch compliance also, dispatch compliance for a long time has not been an issue. We're supposed to get the calls out in 59 seconds, and they do well better than that and have been for a long time. Overall compliance by priority, if you look at that first graph there, you'll see that in December and January, they met their contractual obligations for response time compliance by priority. December was 90%, January was 91%. If you look at the green zone, same thing, priority ones, which are the most acute level calls, they met compliance, as they did through all of the other priorities that we can measure. And again, remember that we have to have at least 100 calls in a priority in a zone in order to have a reasonably accurate measurement of their compliance. And that's per language in the contract. If you look in the yellow zone, they've had some issues. Since October, it's been 87, November 88, December 88, and January 89. We meet with AMR on a monthly basis. We also meet with the Contract Compliance Work Group, which reports to this body, where we go over these response time compliance numbers, and we've had discussions about how historically serving the yellow zone has been problematic for AMR, and obviously we want to see 90% across the board. Whenever they don't meet that 90% compliance in an individual box like that, then they're fined accordingly. In the orange zone, they did not have enough calls in December of 2018 to measure. In January they did, and they were at 91%. And then in the red zone, since there is no response time requirement, it's basically get there as soon as you can because it's a wilderness area. A while back, we started including counts rather than a percentage of compliance because there's really no way to measure that if there's no response time requirement to measure it against. So that's basically it. Any comments or questions on that report?
Fred, I got a comment for as a AMR provider and just to direct everyone's attention to our overall, in the month of November of 2018, we did not meet our priority one response time. And due to that, and I had explanations in our contract compliance meeting that month was challenging for us. We had 2 weeks of mandatory training, which took our staff away from the field of shifts. And of course, we came into the holidays. So that was a tough month for us. We took it hard because we've been in compliance for over a year since I started here in November of 2017, and that month was difficult. Prior to that, it was interesting to see because when we looked at the data, we saw that September, actually June, we staffed the supervisors for Seca. We had over 12 units deployed extra, and we still had our full staff for the rest of the county. We still made compliance for June. And we did that again in September, where we staffed again another 11 units extra deployment for Air Show, Pebble Beach, and Laguna Seca, and we still made compliance. So November was really tough for us because we didn't have the staffing because of mandatory training required by the county. So I just wanted to make that aware of everyone that we take this seriously. If you look at all these zones, especially our yellow zones, less populated, harder to serve because it's more rural, and to get resources out, it is a challenge for us.
And if I can also make a comment that, certainly, we were not provided exemptions for November, but it was also the implementation of ESO. And we do believe that the ESO implementation had a significant impact, resulting in longer deployment times. We did a lot of troubleshooting when the system first went live. And while we were not able to go in and specifically define, what those delays were, whether they were, hospital delays, we are absolutely confident that, it did have a significant impact on our system overall. And we recognize that it was our story to tell, to show we're not able to, come up with a good reflection of, what those impacts were. But we know that that was one of the factors. It was influential in our compliance.
And just so the committee will know, I appreciate those comments, and we really appreciate the fact that AMR went with the ESO. If they had not, there wouldn't have been that much of a reason for implementing it, quite frankly. So we do appreciate that, and we talked a lot, Mike and I, the first week or so of implementation. They did have some challenges, as did other agencies, with figuring out how to use it, and connectivity issues, and CAD dump issues, and all that sort of thing. And AMR did ask us for an exemption for the month of November, and we took a look at that, but basically the problem for us was because the numbers where they didn't meet compliance were so similar to months previous before the implementation of ESO, 89.68% versus 89.74%, that kind of really minute change. It was difficult for us, based on what they provided to us, to say for sure ESO caused this issue with their compliance for that month and that priority in that zone. So that's why we denied that exemption request, but we do appreciate the fact that they went to ESO, very much so.
And to be clear, you know, we did another implementation up north for a different, you know, software platform, and I should make very clear that the ESO implementation here actually went very smooth. I mean, we had 0 missing scripts. You know, despite some of the challenges, we were able to work through it. So it was a smooth implementation, but definitely just, you know, the training time and all the impacts as far as making sure it was working effectively on the new surface codes that we were using. You know, we do feel it had some impact. With that said, it was very smooth.
Great. Are we on? Yes, sir.
So I have some concerns with yellow zone, the inability to make priority one calls. What's being done to improve that? And can you tell me how the new RFP, the justification of the new RFP to convert some of my yellow zones to orange, is that in order to help meet compliance?
I would caution that the new RFP isn't on agendized, so.
But I'm referencing this because I'm trying to figure out why.
I think
They're not
it's
doing
fun to
what's
talk
being done
about
to meet it.
response times right now, and under the current contract. I do not think it's.
What's being done to improve response times in the yellow zones?
So for, at least for AMR, what we've been doing is implementing different system status plans. We've actually started mandatory calling back our employees to a detriment. Some of them frustrated to the point where they're either going part-time or resigning. We are looking at partnering with Greenfield Fire. Actually, we have done this in the past. We posted a unit there. We've actually moved a unit there and settled them there. And it's actually trying to follow that next call based on our system status planning and our prediction of the next call. It's difficult. It is very difficult, especially when we have the prison where we get multiple calls at once, and the next unit's coming from Salinas or even from the peninsula. That takes away resources from CAL FIRE and Highlands, and now we are asking for mutual aid or trying to push our units out of the hospitals quicker. Now patient care is impacted. Now we look at hospitals also or delays. We are sending our supervisors to hospitals to try to pull those folks out sooner. But again, until hospitals can get a bed, we're stuck. So we are doing multiple things.
Thank you, Tim. So what you're saying is you really do need a mutual aid system or mutual aid agreements with the local companies that are in.
We do have, of course, agreements and automatic responses to those specific areas. And again, it's just keeping our finger on the pulse 24/7. Again, we do daily briefings. That's one thing we look at, our compliance every day to see where we're at, what can we do better, what's our staffing. Today we had about 4 call-outs last minute, so now we start managing folks back. We take a big hit pretty quickly.
So if you didn't have those agreements, you could do much lower?
I think the agreements have helped, and I can have Mike speak to that, but I think these numbers probably would have been right at the same. I don't see it would be a big drop, but they do help. Our surrounding counties, San Benito and Santa Cruz, definitely help us in the North County area, and they're the closest to us, so they definitely help out a lot.
I think it's a fair statement, you know, the mutual aid auto agreements, I mean, obviously, you know, they have great value to the system. You know, certainly whenever possible to be able to send the closest resource, and I think that, you know, the patients, you know, they get that advantage. So, yeah, I think it's a fair statement.
Thank you, because it brings up, because most of my area is obviously yellow, and I'm ultimate concern for their response for any ambulance provider in those areas. And I just want to put it on the record that because of this difficulty, I am extremely supportive of continuing with the automatic aid mutual aid agreements and not lowering the response time in specific areas in order to inflate our response time for ambulances and overall.
And also to add, besides doing the 911 system, we also do non-emergency. So we do out of county, and we lose up to 300 hours a month. Lost unit hours coming back from other counties. That's huge. That takes our unit definitely out. So we could be up to a 17 deployment peak, and by midday we're down to 12 because all of them are outside the county because the counties don't have the resources to support the patients. That's a big problem.
And I acknowledge that, and I keep doing the job you're trying to do, but I also want to make sure it's clear that without these agreements, it's going to be extremely difficult. We do not recommend, or I do not recommend in my area, changing our zones from yellow to orange.
Has there been any consideration in increasing the number of units you have so that you don't have to rely on mutual aid as often?
We do staff, we actually staff extra unit hours to at least try to account for those losses that we have. But again, last minute call-outs, last minute long distance transfers to San Diego, we get at least one of those every other month. That unit's gone 50 to 60 hours, so we lose very quickly. So a lot of it's 5150 that can be done by BLS units that are in the ALS. We're sending a full paramedic ambulance to San Diego, and that's contractually required by us. We're in a tough position. So like I said, our November compliance was hard. We take these very seriously. We manage it on a day-to-day basis almost to our detriment because we have a lot of sleepless hours paying attention to our system. So,
You know, I think it would help if, going back to the comments on the yellow zone, of the 13 months indicated on the graph there, I think only 4 or 5 are within compliance within the yellow zone. Could we possibly get, is there any factors that affect the yellow zone more than any others? This body needs to know.
the factors, I think the yellow zone where we've seen it hit has been from the prison. Just the prison population commits our units for a long period of time. Again, we immediately adjust our system status plan to cover those areas, but that's a very unpredictable area where, and it's hard to serve just because of the distance. So I think those have been our challenges. What are we doing? We are just trying to get our folks out quicker and get them out to those areas a lot sooner, and trying to develop areas where we can start their work at those locations, either Greenfield or Soledad. And we do have 2 24 hours in South County, which work. It's hard. It's a hard to serve area.
Tino, the CTF and Salinas Valley, and those are a 12-minute zone, right? It's
right.
Internal to the Department of Corrections.
Right.
And now we're hearing that they're going to be closing their clinic down, so probably going to be more of an impact to you folks at one of those facilities. So I think it's not going to go away anytime soon, that heavy volume.
Tino and Fred, I was actually going to ask about this outside of the meeting, but I'm just wondering, looking at the yellow zones and with some of the challenges with meeting response, there are multiple yellow zones and they're sporadic throughout the geography of the county. Does anybody look at, this yellow zone and see how they're performing? I guess my worry is that, we might have a South County area and it's not performing as well as an area someplace else, and just kind of looking for equity in that response. And I don't know if that's something that is available to local jurisdictions or if that's something that's monitored.
We do monitor it. We usually don't provide specific reports for specific jurisdictions or cities, but we definitely can meet offline and we can look at those numbers.
And I can tell you, Chief, that a little while back, I can't remember exactly when it was, the contract compliance work group asked for specifically what you're talking about. So we did a heat map of, where the late calls are in the yellow zones and that kind of thing. And what we found was that it was spread out pretty evenly. There wasn't a particular part, a yellow zone somewhere in a particular part of the county, which was much worse off than any place else. They were fairly statistically insignificant, the differences in the various yellow zones.
And just for clarity in my question, just to make sure, being a new guy here, coming across the right way. At least from my standpoint, and I think definitely from my partner agencies in our area, we would like to have that information, because if there's something that we can be doing and we're budgeting for or preparing for to ensure that we're providing good, fast patient response, we would like to have that information.
It's not a bad idea for us to do it every now and then, to kind of spot check it.
One of the things that the contract compliance working group is very concerned about are underserved areas, which are covered in the context of the contract. And that's what Fred is alluding to. That's what brought that issue up. We were looking for underserved areas specifically, and statistically it did not bear out. I think that awareness and will remain, particularly with respect to the data we have here now. That will drive it.
And Jody, if I may, the contract calls for overall county. The contract didn't address these issues. We did way back when, we worried about the areas. The current contract doesn't. So we have to ask, they do produce, Tino's got the data, so yeah, if you can't get that data, because I do care about the South County where they're all dispersed, and other areas too. But yes, I asked about our area. If you can't get the data, then bring it up here and we'll make sure that data, but they do produce it. We do look at it every month, or every other month.
Every other month.
And to be clear as well, is that, we've had a lot of eyes look at this, from AMR standpoint, we have a national deployment team. We've invited a lot of different eyes from different systems to try to see if they can, look at best practices, look at, other deployment plans that maybe, we haven't been able to, to see. But the reality is, it's, almost 4,000 square miles. In some of the lower volume areas, it's just very difficult to try to estimate, where those calls are going to come in and, how we weigh, the resources that we have in a limited fashion across the county to kind of predict that. And if you do look at some of the density maps, you'll see it's just like somebody taking a pepper, sprayer, just, shaking it across the entire county, and some of those are just really challenging for us. So, but we definitely look at equity. We do recognize that, our compliance is based on system-wide services, but we definitely try to figure out ways to make sure that we're, there's some equity across all of the districts throughout the county.
I agree with the chief. A lot of those areas are mine as well, and I have no idea what the response times are. And we'd like to be able to see that on a more regular basis with this. And not that we have to ask for it. If it's already being produced, it should be in some product that's already being given to us. I would recommend that if it comes to this package, bring it together.
We can take that back to the contract compliance group for regular reporting. Okay. Any other comments on that issue, the dispatch and response time? Eric?
Jody, I've got a comment just to reference Gary's suggestion to add more paramedics into the system to resolve the issues. As someone who recently put on a recruitment process, we started with 900 applications, and after backgrounds and medical physicals and interviews, we got 5 paramedics out of that 900. And we're not alone. Slings Fire is struggling to retain and bring in new medics. Monterey Fire just started an ALS program. It's not a local problem, it's a statewide problem, and I'd like to give a nod to Chief Fulcher. It really underscores the need of sharing what we have.
Ready to move on to item C, which I think we're deferring, isn't that correct? Jared?
Yeah, basically, until we get that EPI on board, we don't have a reliable method to extract those first response times.
So then you're up for item D, the Medical Advisory Subcommittee MPDS workgroup.
So last July, this MAC established and seated a MPDS work group with the goal to identify and ensure that all EMS calls are identified and routed through MPDS where possible. So we met since September 5 times. All stakeholders were invited and represented. This is a report as a result of those meetings, identifying the current practices, the current concerns, the barriers, stakeholder concerns, and some solutions based on those meetings. And I can answer any questions. Anybody have?
So having read that report, I want to give a nod for the honesty in that report. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments about that specific report or questions about the report?
I just have one comment. Is that I think at the operations subcommittee, I think what Eric was referring to earlier, I think we really want to say thank you to Dr. Stubblefield. It was very clear. They asked simply, you as the medical director, what do you need? And he says, I want, all medical calls to be to be medically reviewed upon 911. And so that was the basis of the fire service going back through its representatives on those committees to give a clear direction to meet Dr. Stubblefield's intent. And so what they asked for was a working group to get our new 911 emergency communications manager, Chief Fulcher with their ECC staff, whatever, to kind of have a work group. And as Eric mentioned, that it was supposed to, I think, convene because we have some new stakeholders, and it sounds like that did not happen. Is that kind of?
So I think maybe we're confusing the EMS communications policies.
Okay. With the NPDS.
With the NPDS. I did speak at length in the MAC committee to the concerns that were raised about the medical priority dispatch meetings. There were key people absent from the meeting. We did not have a 911 EMS director at the time. There were numerous objections raised by the fire service, and I don't want to rehash the whole conversation that was held at MAC, but it was an unsatisfactory process, speaking from the perspective of the fire service.
And the one thing I just want to point out, it puts us in a very difficult position because I think Susan's made it very clear we can't talk about the RFP. Unfortunately, the RFP has NPDS slides in there that contradict what potentially policies are in draft form. And how do we fix a document that we can't have a voice in? And so that's kind of our frustrations, and we know there's pressure to get this done by the end of the month. So I don't have the answer how we can get stakeholders' input while we have an active RFP circulating, but it has information in there that the fire chiefs will not support because we never saw that document. Brian came, did a presentation at our last EMCC, and I think it was a great presentation. I think we all agree with that. The next day, the RFP came out with those slides in there. We didn't even, so it's so I'm not trying to be a fly in the ointment, but you can see our frustrations. We're trying to have a process where stakeholders have a voice, and then we're saying we can't talk to anybody about it. So we just hope at some point if we can at least get a working group to get a couple of these things resolved. I think it'd be in the best interest for everybody. Thank you.
I was at a couple of those, or at least one of them, my staff were always at those meetings. Maybe I'm wrong, I thought the information was to collect data. I thought the information was to collect data, provide information, and develop procedures and policies to come out so that we can move forward with NPDS. Those NPDS policies, or EMS policies for NPDS, did come out, and obviously with the last special meeting, there was a goal to pull those communication policies out and review them separately. I don't see how we're going to move forward with doing that if they're going to be approved by January, or assuming March 31st. It's sort of like the ship is sailed and there is no recourse to provide any more input. And because of the lack of input in the meeting or the dissatisfaction with the meeting, I think it behooves us to stop, at least on that communication process, at least on those policies, and not move forward until we can come to some sort of consensus. It affects us all. It affects everybody out there. We want to get there. We want to provide NPDS. We just need some more collaboration.
I'd just like to reiterate, I took this issue back to the law enforcement chiefs in the county, and I had reported back that there was an agreement that they were going to pull the 3000 series from that, and there was going to be discussion. That was my understanding. I can tell you if we move forward with this item, there is concern from the law chiefs that we're not following this process, and it doesn't seem transparent, and it doesn't seem like there's any collaboration going on. And I will be reporting that back to the board or to the county chiefs at the conclusion of all these meetings.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that there's been some discussion with the EMS agency, and it seemed like there was some progress made. One of the main issues was when the call comes into the emergency communications center, is there a delay before it goes to the fire, critical fire and ambulance at the same time? It seems like there was some movement on that issue, and I'm just maybe ask the director what the process is to get those changes into this policy and still keep the RFP going.
So,
Talk about the
let me talk about the policies and let people know what has changed since we met a month ago. Because I think the EMS agency has made what I call significant concessions. Last Thursday, I reached out to Guidance Panels of the Monterey City Fire Chief. And I said, is there something we can do quickly to alleviate some of the fire's concerns? And we agreed. We spent, I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes on the phone. Jared Bagwell was there, so we had the MPDS expertise. And we agreed we would stipulate that the EMS Communications Center does not dispatch fire department or law enforcement first responders. They provide MPDS services and dispatch services for the Monterey County EOA contract. Okay, so one of the concerns was that, well, are you going to force fire are you going to force fire into this? And the answer is no, we're not. So all medical calls, except some special situations such as law enforcement calls, scene safety, and some specialized rescue calls received at the Monterey County 911 Center shall be simultaneously generated in the CAD assignment queue for both fire and EMS. This means that the fire dispatcher and the ambulance dispatcher both received a call at the same time. Okay? So there is no delay. The medical caller for all medical calls, except the special situations such as law enforcement calls, scene safety, and some specialized rescue, the caller themselves shall be transferred to the EMS Communications Center Emergency Medical Dispatcher, who will provide medical priority dispatch services, including identifying the MPDS determinant and providing pre-arrival instructions. The EMS Communications Center shall transfer all MPDS case entry script, Pro QA summary script, and all manually entered information, such as patient updates and scene safety, to the appropriate fire dispatcher. And what that means is, as the EMS dispatcher is going through that MPDS query, asking questions and entering it into the computer, the fire dispatcher is immediately getting that. So there's no delay, there's no withholding of information. The EMS Communication Center through the ProA summary script will provide a determinant. The EMSAG recommends the first responders base their response on that determinant, as it's the clinically indicated response code. However, every fire department or every first responder, fire law, whoever it is free to choose their own response code. So the major concerns that have been brought to the EMS agency, there's going to be a delay in handling this call, or the delay in the response. That's set aside. The idea that we're going to prescribe the response code for the fire department, we're not doing that either. You choose your code. What we're doing is making sure that every caller gets the MPDS query. And candidly, and some of you know about this, since our last meeting, we had a case, which is exactly what we've been trying to avoid, where we had a caller, the call was treated as a fire service call, and was a cardiac arrest. And on callback, the medical dispatch provider provided CPR instructions late after a second callback. This is exactly what we have been trying to avoid. Now, we believe in what we have done has really more than met people halfway. We've responded to the specific concerns that have been brought to us. And in the talk that Jared Bagwell and I had with Chief Panholzer last week, I said, do you want us to schedule a meeting? And he goes, I don't think it's going to be necessary. Let me get these policies
out to the chiefs. And after we agreed on those things that I just read to you, we made modifications in all the policies. We sent them to him, he sent them to the fire chief, and then yesterday afternoon, we got a letter back from the fire chiefs. And there is one thing I don't think we can come to agreement on, and that's okay, we don't have to, but it's recognition of the authority, the authority of the EMS agency to have medical control over this and the EMS system. And I can respect the opinion that you don't agree with it or you think it's an overreach, but I do have to say, we have a county council's memo that you've all been given on this. We believe our position is legally defensible. More importantly, we believe it is an improvement in clinical care, and that's where we are.
Madam Chair, just a comment. I think, Michael, we appreciate these. I think you've hit some of the flexibility, but it's a process. You notified Chief Panholzer on Thursday. He has to then coordinate with 23 other fire departments, right, for comments back were due Tuesday, right? So now we have 4 days, including the weekend, to be able to get you some feedback. More importantly, we want to be able to hear from communication managers. ECC, Fort Hunter Liggett Fire Department has their own dispatch, Palm Fire Department has their own dispatch, City of Carmel has their own dispatch. We need to have that working group. That was the whole premise a month ago, to get folks together, all these stakeholders, so we can hear from our 911 director to say exactly what you just said. Can she make that work under our system? I'm not a CAD guy, but Mike, I've worked for 5 different EMS directors as 13 years of fire chief. How you interpret that policy, and you're not here someday, we're gonna get someone else saying, that's not how I read it. So that's why the more people that have a voice, that understand what the intent was, and Dr. Stubblefield was very clear, and that's what we appreciate. He gave clear direction, leader's intent, all calls will be medical priority screened. Now we just gotta get the nuts and bolts to, and like you said, we might not be able to do the level everybody wants, but at least they had a voice and we can hear from the experts can we do what Chief Fulcher's saying is, hey, or Mike Nickman saying, we just don't want to delay. We want to kind of get the same information, even though we know that the call taker's probably still asking medical questions. That's really simple. That's where we're at. It seems like there's a stall tactic. 4 days before we need input, 23 different fire departments have to give Chief Panholzer input, and then people are just upset. If we would have followed the original vote of the process, well, then we wouldn't be here probably talking.
Well, and Chief, I respect or understand the position, but I think we have to look at what the whole input process has been starting in September when we put out we were going to do these policies. We requested written comments using the standardized, public comment process, and those comments were generally, Jared could speak to this in more detail, where you don't have the authority to do these things. The other, Jared, why don't you speak to the public comment process and what we received, and then speak to what we received as reflected in the work group, where we reached out and have been trying since last September to get feedback. So
yeah, part of the work group was to collaborate, get very specific information of, oh, this won't work for us, let's do this, do that. But there was really only comments such as, you don't have the authority to do this, we object to it. That CAL FIRE wants to have a secondary PSAP. They want to carve out that medical call-taking process and take that over. And those are really the 2 or 3 things that were discussed, not actually in the purpose of the work group was very simply to take what we're doing now and ensure that the ones that are purposefully being screened out get now routed through MPDS. So that was, they're conflating to the EMS comm policies versus what that original work group was set up for. The original work group was just to ensure that all the calls went through, which did not affect any current practices, did not, affect any dispatch processes. It was just that. And so, there wasn't much to go on after the end of this. We all stakeholders were represented. So we believe we got some good information to put this report together. The policies were done, on a different parallel path, but a lot of that information was also included in the policies as we went along.
Jared, a question. You said that all stakeholders were involved. Was County Com present?
They were for the interim director and her managers were in attendance in the first 3 or 4. They chose not to participate in the last 2.
Well, therein may be the problem. That's a key element. And if the key element is not participating, how can we get any closer?
And do we know why they didn't?
Yeah.
I can't speak.
Well, we were told that they were frustrated about the process. If they're not going to be heard, then they're not going to participate. Hence, we got a new 911 director, and we're saying, if we could have had a meeting the last couple of weeks, we hear from her with her experience. Remember, this is her shop. She needs to implement Dr. Stubblefield's medical control policy.
That's right.
So, these are county partners, right? And so, no one wants to be an obstructionist. We just want to hear from the leadership, can they meet the intent of the stakeholders?
Yeah.
That's all we're really asking.
So 2 things. One is, I just want to correct Jared, we are a secondary piece of that, not that we want to be one. And second, was the intent of that working group was very narrowly focused on how the EMS Communications Center could implement MPDS, not following Dr. Stubblefield's direction of making sure every call is MPDS. That's why we, as CAL FIRE, objected to it. We want to meet the doctor's direction of all calls. We just felt that that was strictly narrow and only focused on one entity doing it and not providing any entity with the ability to do it and create procedures to make that happen. So I just want to make sure that's clear. When it comes to, I'm going to take a third. When it comes to the policies themselves, I want to thank Mr. Petrie. Thank you again for reaching out to Chief Panholzer. The Chief Panholzer was one individual. It's not a working group. The month before, this group here said, let's pull all those policies out, create a working group to deal with those issues that you directed towards Chief Panholzer. We believe that you should come back to that working group, implement that, and deal with that in a larger fashion to be able to meet the intent.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I know that Chief Panholzer sent back some comments on the policies. I don't know if they reached it or not, because everything that you said today did not get into those policies. And they're identified in those comments back. Another thing is, you said at a meeting Mike Petrie, you said at a meeting with the EMS agents for the health department that day that we met over there, that there is no consensus. That was really disappointing on our end. And then this other example you just brought up today about the, what happened with CPR. And I've worked at the dispatch center for many years until I became a fire chief. And these policies wouldn't have changed that. That sounds like the call was classified incorrectly at the beginning. Because the way the system is today, every call that generated with fire or EMS call goes to the dispatch EMR and fire.
With respect, we listened to it and we know what we're trying to do would have changed it. We talk about it one-on-one if you want, but it would have picked it up.
But I mean, as far as,
query.
but if it was classified some type of medical where the AMR dispatcher would have got it in the beginning, that's like a CAD change or something like that. I mean, it sounded like it was classified incorrectly in the beginning. And if it's classified incorrectly even down the road, that a call that doesn't go to MPDS, then it's going to happen again.
So can I ask, I'm not clear where we are with the policies in the current process. And is it something that we need to discuss at the special meeting, or is it something that is resolvable today? I'm not clear.
Jody.
Yeah.
Not sure if this adds clarity, but I have very specific concerns attached to each policy revision that I would like to communicate to the group. I'm not sure if the venue is appropriate for today's meeting or for a special meeting, but I've got a laundry list based on Chief McGowan's comments about a short time frame and many of those suggestions not coming through into the new draft.
So we have, I mean, not that we can't go over, but 15 minutes at the end and we haven't hit new business yet. Clearly, we're going to have a special meeting and we have the ability to call it as soon as 24 hours, but I'm not sure we will.
I'm agreeable to adding this item,
To
which
the-
is
to
the
the
EMS
special-
communications policy, to the special meeting.
Thank you. Okay.
If you do that, can you delay implementing the 3000 series policies then until that meeting's over?
Well, that's what I'm at. I don't,
Because right now, we've been told that it's not going to be delayed and will be implemented on the 31st, or start on the 31st, and go into policy on July 1st.
but they go, the training starts March 1st and they're implemented July 1st.
It would defeat the purpose if we don't have that.
Yeah, we had this discussion during MAC, and the direction of the EMS Director was, the train is moving, these are the deadlines, and that's the final word.
I'll consider the comments here today.
Okay. Related to, and when we have a special meeting, let's be clear, we are an advisory board, but certainly our advice, what we come up with as an advisory committee is certainly will be documented.
Jody, if I may?
It will be what it is.
If I may,
Yes.
we're advisory to the Board of Supervisors, not to the EMS agency, is my understanding.
Oh.
And I guess from a procedure standpoint, and when we get to the German, I will make some additional comments, but to Dr. Rosen's point is, what's the public's voice in this process? We have an RFP that's circulating right now that has MPDS slides that say one thing than what the Policy 3000 potentially will. Who do we believe, right? So those are a little bit of our frustrations, and I don't know another way around it, that you can't talk about one, we got a, train's moving so fast, we have to get this going. Then the voice and public process is,
It's ultimately just wasted time.
yeah.
Jody?
Yes.
If I could, just to clarify so that we can make sure that there's not anything in the special meeting that is left off the table and needs to be discussed. Should we direct, as made clear as an ex officio member, I can't make a motion, can I direct an inquiry to the EMS agencies to include certain things on the agenda so that there are certain items? Because what we were talking about last month, there was basically three things that I was referring to.
Yes.
You know, the issue that the fire chiefs didn't feel that they had input, the EMD issues that Chief Panels brought up that may or may not have been addressed already, and the definition of medical control. That's always been the three issues that everybody seems to not have answered, so.
So I think when we come to the special meeting, we need to discuss what our agenda items are going to be and how we're going to get those agenda items published for everybody in a timely fashion, and how we do that. So I'm sorry Susan left, but she got this same direction. Okay.
I just wanted to go on the record. I spoke also at the MAC committee. A couple of different things, and if it gets agendized in a special meeting, that'd be great. Chief McGowan, I've worked down at Firecom for 10 years as well. The call that you're talking about, the processing of it is the key. Just to go on the record, if the caller says there's no injury, it goes to the fire dispatch. The fire truck will go pick them up. If it says yes, the guy's hurt, it goes into EMD 100% of the time, with a few exceptions. That has been the case for as long as I can remember, since whoever the dispatch or the ambulance company that's been doing EMD is in the process. Secondly, I think that one of the issues, and I'm sure Eric has many more, but I brought up in the earlier meeting was the providing of the explanation of the response that the fire departments have to do in order to go to a call is a concern of ours. If we feel we want to go code 3 to something that contradicts, or we feel there's a reason that justifies it to go, it's a difficult thing for us to have to do as a fire department, is why we're going code 3. And that's like telling a cop not to go do something as well. It's an interesting dynamic of authority and responsibility. The other thing was the repercussions of not following such direction or policy. What would that mean? What does that look like? So the choice can be made at the risk or the liability for the organization or the agency to not follow the direction of what the EMS agency is saying as far as, well, we're going code 3 anyway because we see this is one of those circumstances we want to do. Are we going to get sent to the state? Are we going to get our paramedics taken away? What's going to happen there? And the last thing I'll say is, I recently moved from a battalion chief into the interim deputy chief position in the fire department. Oh, gee, thanks. Yeah, this is great. One of the things, I've sat through these processes, and I mentioned it earlier, for 30 years in this county. Nice to see a lot of friendly faces. The process is a concern of mine. I haven't sat through a lot of the meetings. Scotty sits through a lot of them, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from other chiefs. But to me, the way I'm looking at this is after this meeting, depending on how and what I see is a potential outcome or progress of this, I'm going to our city attorney and talking about PROM Act violations and holding this process up, because I don't want to do that. I want to see an RFP come through. I want to see communication, cooperation, collaboration, all the words we use, transparency. That's what I want to see. I'm not seeing it. So I feel like, I'm in a position that I have responsibility to 180,000 people in Salinas and their medical care. And I have to pass this forward and have that discussion with our city attorney. So whether they choose to do anything, that's their choice, but this is an interesting dynamic that I don't understand and I've never seen before.
So clearly, this will need to be agendized for this special meeting, and clearly we're going to need to get written information from all of the people that submit concerns on how we will specifically agendize and discuss and act on these issues, because they're immense.
Yeah, Chief Panholzer being phone called,
He just
walked in. But it's kind of a, our department right now, we have an interim chief, we have interim deputy chiefs, it's to rely on, no offense, but him to get that information to me from him on such a critical issue. I think that's a really bad choice and a bad process to go through to do that. I needed to have that directly to my department through other means, not through Chief Panholzer, so, thank you.
Yeah, so we need to talk about how we move forward with that special meeting. Can we move on to new business? And I need to ask of the new business, is there anything that we can defer?
Really, I'd recommend we defer the EMS plan.
We can't defer that.
We cannot defer that. It's going to take some time.
Start.
Well then, because we need to approve the EMS plan to move forward.
We think it would be ideal that it is accepted by this committee. It is a requirement that every EMS agency submit an annual EMS plan to the EMS authority. And what this is basically a simple update of the same plan we submitted last year, which was an update of the same plan from the year before.
I do have a question, that you have to submit the plan. Is there a due date by statute, by some regulation?
There is a due date.
May 31st. But it's got to go to the board too.
I'm sorry, what was that?
May 31st, and it has to go to the board too before that. So.
Thank you.
So it sounds like there's lots of business. But what about if items B, C, and D, I know that may need to be addressed as well. Can,
I think these C&D people are free to read the document. You know,
okay.
the staff reports, I think, are pretty comprehensive. If people want to talk about those, we can.
I'd like to talk about, I have several letters from my staff, from the EMSA, basically stating that under the investigation, my paramedics, all but one, were found, there's no evidence found to support the fraudulent charge that you submitted up to the EMSA. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is the communication that I received.
No, I read the letter, but the letter said nothing about any of the individuals that there was no evidence to support that the paramedics in the field themselves were actually fraudulent or did anything illegal.
So what I can say is we have and have clear evidence of what happened and what did not, which includes emails from management level people in the organization saying, I'm responding to your question, thank you. So, that said, we didn't do this training. Now, these are all public records. So if you or the media wants to scrutinize the work we've done, we stand by it.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is that you submitted roughly, I'm not even sure the number, 100-something paramedics to the state EMS and told them that they were fraudulent in their paperwork. And I'm just telling you that I'm receiving letters back from state EMSA reference to these paramedics, they saw money, and stating there was no evidence, period, that they committed fraud.
So I think that would be a
And if they
question
found
you'd
no
have to-
evidence,
you-
they found no evidence, then how can we say that there was evidence?
Maybe I need to read this letter from the state. In your preliminary investigation, I'm starting on the second paragraph. Well, actually, let me take the time to read it. This letter is in response to your correspondence dated March 8, 2018 to the authorities supervising investigator Mike Smith regarding the preliminary investigation conducted by the Monterey County EMS agency concerning potential violations by approximately 145 paramedics of Monterey County EMS system policies and procedures concerning fraudulent activities related to accreditation requirements. In your preliminary investigation, you accurately identified significant system issues with your EMS paramedic providers as to how certain skills training for paramedics was being conducted, and just as importantly, how the training was being recorded, tracked, or completed. Our subsequent investigation verified your findings. The actions that were taken by Monterey County EMS were appropriate and necessary given the issues that were occurring within the EMS system concerning medical control and quality of care. The immediate measures and requirements put in place by Monterey County EMS protected public health and safety. Changes put in place will importantly benefit patients and the EMS system. The authority has completed its investigation of potential violations of Health and Safety Code 1797-200C. The authority has determined complaints against the individual paramedics were best managed by your swift and appropriate actions at the paramedic provider level. However, in the case of paramedic training supervisors, EMS coordinators, or their respective paramedic provider agencies, those EMS coordinators are entrusted with a higher level of responsibility to ensure the records are completed accurately and truthfully. Moreover, those individuals serve as an important link to the quality of care provided in the Monterey County EMS systems. Our findings indicate that the EMS coordinators knowingly failed to carry out that responsibility. The authority has undertaken licensed disciplinary action against 3 of the paramedic training supervisors of the number that you referred to investigation. So that's the communication we've had.
So, and I acknowledge that there were 3 paramedics supervisors who received administrative, punitive, or just administrative actions, but I want to read this. Dear paramedic, pursuant to the Health and Safety Code, the Emergency Medical Services Authority, EMSA, is authorized to make inquiries into allegations of paramedic misconduct based on a complaint from Monterey County EMS regarding fraudulent submission of documentation in order to obtain county accreditation. EMSA conducted an investigation for Health and Safety Code Section 1798.200. This letter is to inform you that EMSA has reviewed the information surrounding the circumstances of the allegation and have found no evidence of violation of the Health and Safety Code. EMSA will close this investigation. The point being, you submitted 145 photos, and they're saying there was no evidence whatsoever. You found 3, so that would be, percentage here is less than 1% or 3%.
So what they also said, and what the state law requires us to do, is if we have something that may indicate a violation of 1798-200, which this did, we have a responsibility to submit it to EMSA. They make the determination on what happened. We simply said the preliminary evidence suggests this may have happened, and we sent it up. We did what we're required to do under state law, and they did what they're required.
So I just want to make sure that you did what you did. I want to make sure that in this public forum, that we all understand that at least 143 of the 145 individuals that you submitted and said did something wrong, did not.
So noted. Thank you.
I just have maybe a procedural question. We never, I'm assuming our paramedics were also sent that 145 original number. We've never got any formal closure from the state as kind of an umbrella saying, hey, all your paramedics or whatever. And so what our paramedics now, when they go through the recertification process, I think there's a box on there, has your license been suspended or investigated? This, what are they supposed to put? I mean, it sounds like we're all investigated. What's the closure that they have a letter that they can attach to?
Well, I'll tell you what it is, because I put yes, and they made me go through this big extensive process, paid extra money, it was delayed in my certification, which affected my pay, and then they kicked it back and said, oh, wait a minute, no, you didn't have to do that. And that's a great question, because I have been investigated, but I was found not guilty, and it's created a...
So from a closure standpoint, I think it sounds like we're kicking the ball to the state when we want to. Now, locally, when we set in our accreditation paperwork for our paramedics, what documentation they have where they don't have to check that box anymore, and they kind of got a clean bill of health, so to speak, because it sounds like we're getting set up for failure. Our paramedics are going to click the box no, and then they're going to be investigated again for lying, and it's just a vicious cycle.
Maybe I can stop this from becoming an issue and say, and we will be glad to put a memo out to all the agencies for those, and Mike, you did not have anyone investigated.
But do we have some sent to the state?
I don't think so. We will put out a memo saying that if you have received a letter saying you are found innocent of all charges, that you don't have to disclose that.
Perfect.
And that will resolve or prevent that from becoming an issue.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes.
And there's one last thing, is like, if you were teaching and you had half your class fail, there's something wrong with the teacher. Let's be honest. If you've got that, in this case, we have 143 paramedics that all seem to have the same issue. It sounds like there might have been an acknowledgement of, well, it turns out there was an issue. But maybe we need to sit down and go, hey, here's how to make sure you're doing things properly so that we don't have this and put everybody through this scenario again in the future.
Well, one of the things we want to do in the next 6 months is revise those policies to make it much clearer what the expectation is and make the accreditation process clearer and simpler by empowering the individual paramedic to submit their CE, and we will issue then an accreditation card to that paramedic, because it holds that individual accountable.
Michael, from the-
No, it's not licensure, just accreditation. It'll be, I'm sorry.
from an administrative point of view, the state has made a determination. Now, I think it's incumbent upon you to take the action that you indicate. I would go so forth as to say a letter to the individuals, not just the agencies, but a letter to the individuals, if necessary, attach the state letter that essentially cleared them of any wrongdoing and forward that to them. That closes the loop, it gets them off the hook and protects them. I think that's basically one of the most important issues here is to protect the people. It's an administrative action.
So we don't have a copy of that list right now, and we'll try to get it and send those letters out.
I think that's essential. Yeah, someone does, and the people are in limbo at the moment. Let's get that clear.
And just one final comment for me, I know you hear a lot from me so far in these meetings, but we lost 3 people because of this too, just so you realize. I mean, people don't want to deal with this stuff, and they left. In the future, it'd be nice if we talk about this, and I don't know if you did or not, but my understanding is, notifying the organization, these are the names of the people we have question about, not just getting a letter at home someday, and have a bunch of panic paramedics coming into work and saying, holy crap, am I going to lose my job? Because that's the way this was being about
In each
as well.
case, we met with the leadership of the organization before things were sent up to the state.
Okay. I'm in the leadership and I wasn't included in that, so.
I think that's accurate.
No, when we met with you, Mike, and the representatives from CAL FIRE, it had not been sent to the state yet. And remember, we waited 2 weeks while you said, or the representatives from CAL FIRE said they would submit data. We were told this was all a paperwork mistake. And we were told by the CAL FIRE reps they would submit data to us within 2 weeks. I think our initial meeting was April 13th, and the data was due to us on the 27th. We received that information, and it's still, it did not indicate anyone had completed the training of all the names that were submitted. So we allowed opportunity for any paperwork error to be corrected, and it wasn't. So I disagree with a narrative that's being advanced that this was a witch hunt or something like that. We had an obligation under state law to do what we did. We did it. It's not pleasant for anyone.
Well, my problem is, we gave you the information, and there were a few concerns. There were some issues about whether the training, whether training was actually required, or you could meet the standard another way. And it doesn't, and it sounds to me like when it got up to the state level, they said there was no problem. So what our concern is how come, as a local EMS director, you sent up 140 names for paramedics when there's no evidence of wrongdoing? Now, there's an impact for that. You just talked about, you're having trouble, both AMR and Monterey County Region said, you're having trouble getting paramedics. And so if I'm a paramedic and I can work in another county or this county where I'm going to get, where I might get my name thrown up to the state for no reason, they're going to go to the other county. And so I think there's just room for improvement in the future. I mean, if you had come to us right at the beginning and said, hey, we think you got a problem with your training, we could have sat down and had a conversation. It wasn't, you said, send me your records, We didn't know what it was for. I mean, by the time we did the second time.
So,
but
if you want, we can agendize this and go over this in detail with everyone.
I'm not worried about what happened. It's already done.
I would say the matter is closed. I think there were learning opportunities on multiple levels.
Try and avoid
Multiple
this.
levels.
We just would like to avoid having
Absolutely.
all of our
Trust me,
paramedics send up a disciplinary action when there's actually no evidence of
And
it.
that I understand what you're asking and appreciate your concern. In the interest of time, because it's already past our time, first of all, we will be calling a special meeting. I guess I would ask, I'm going to limit this question to the members of the committee. We can do it as soon as a week from today or further out. Let me start with Dr. Roberts. Within a week? Okay. Is everybody good with a week from Wednesday who's on this committee?
20th of March.
Yes.
Good.
Okay,
I won't be second.
okay. Does it have to be a Wednesday? A Tuesday? Or you're going to be on next week? On next week. Would the week following be too late?
I'm good on the week following the 27th.
The whole week?
Uh,
This is an important meeting that I don't want.
Yeah, I'm good the whole week of the 25th.
Does it put it too far out if we schedule for the same day, or instead of the contract compliance committee meeting next month?
Is that too far out, a month from now?
If I can just comment, I mean, I'm sorry I'm not part of the committee, but I certainly don't want to delay our rate increase discussion for another month.
Okay.
We're taking it forward to the board anyway.
It's moving forward. Yeah, and quite honestly, I think it's an advisory, we aren't going to change that. We can talk about it, but we're not going to change it. We talked about it in contract compliance.
And I'm okay with making a motion to move that forward if it helps politically.
I would second that.
Okay,
Thank you.
there you go. So now we're back to a meeting. So I have,
What did we end up doing with the EMS plan? Did we?
I'm putting the EMS plan on the special meeting.
Okay.
And this is gonna be a monster meeting. We also have to talk about how long we wanna talk.
I understand the EMS plan is just the standard response to the state, it's standardized report that we submit, so I don't think, the only thing I would suggest are some recommendations for changing some clerical stuff in there. But-
Right, and we can talk about that at the special meeting. I don't,
There's a few things I'd like clarified, maybe.
yeah. There's enough information in that plan that we want discussion, and here we are at 10 after. So I'm either gonna go with so Harold, what'd you say?
17th, which is the same day next month.
17th
Some
of
of us
April?
already have the contract compliance.
Instead of contract compliance.
I think we're trying to get it done before the 31st, so
So the 27th?
I'm good on the 27th.
Okay.
25th in the morning. Yeah, 10:30.
That's when you're available, is 25th? of
I'm
November?
available Monday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, so
How about this
Okay.
Friday?
I'm not available, although I'd be happy.
I think they probably want to,
You need 3 days to.
But we actually can do it within 24 hours, but I think we need to be thoughtful about what's on the agenda and how we're going to discuss that. It needs to be specific. I'm going to ask for then the 27th, and
I won't be.
10:30.
my second.
I'm on vacation. I'm leaving Friday. I'll be out in Melbourne next week.
Can we have
27th
you call
is
in
the following
telephonically?
No.
Just post the agenda.
I'm going on vacation. I'm going to be out of the area.
Dr. Stubblefield, you're going to take control of that meeting.
Might be amazing.
We are in a precarious position. Time is of the essence. We have to pick a date, and at some point, there will be members who won't be here. I really, and the earliest you can do it is the 1st of April.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the 3rd of April.
Well, I guess if we get consensus by Michael that he's willing to defer it until we meet, and whenever that is, but we can't say can't meet. And then-
Can't we, yeah, at some
we
point,
gotta come up
we
with
just
something.
need to say we're gonna do it. And the first week of April goes past a specific deadline that's of concern.
Not for me, but I think for Michael's intent to try to get this done by the 31st. We're trying to keep it on.
I can meet on Friday the 22nd.
Committee members,
I'm available.
let's do it, Friday the 22nd. I'm gonna say 9:30 to 12:30.
Okay.
And I'll sponsor lunch.
I was just saying, somebody needs to bring snacks, because I run out about 11:30. 9:30, and we can get a meeting room
Do
here.
you know if you get the room?
Might not be this one, but
Okay.
So
If you
among,
can't get a room, you can meet at OES. I have
okay,
I just want to know for the notes with the emergency responders, that is at
You have
the
a
same
meeting.
time as the Nazi
do I
Manitou
need to restate
San
that?
Antonio dam failure meeting for pre-response.
Yeah, so that's my meeting time, Kelsey and OES. We have the Nacimiento Dam Inundation EAP planning meeting for San Antonio Dam as well. I can move that to later on in the day if you.
that would be helpful, thank you.
Okay, I can put that in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we can have it at the same facility, that way you can just go from one meeting right into the next.
So,
We all get by lunch.
Gary will run it.
agenda items that I can tell you we will have
my meeting.
So, from Dr. Rosen, and thank you for bringing this forward, one of the agenda items is going to be concern with the language in the RFP, although we cannot change the RFP, we can comment on it, and so we will have a comment on that issue. We obviously have the EMS plan on there. Chief, can you just tell me how we're going to agendize the dispatch question?
Okay, Jody, did we get, for Jerry, does that address your item?
Well, one of them.
So, yeah, so we'll need to get, so I'll get next to you after.
I think, Madam Chair, what I would do is, just direct staff to work with county council to make sure it meets everybody's intent. That way, we don't say one thing and it comes back and contradicts. I think we know,
Okay.
again, we're advisory, but what's the process that we can get some stakeholder input?
And we can provide stakeholder input and then give advice to the board and to the EMS agency.
And I think.
And it's advice.
From a process standpoint, is how are we communicating with the Board of Supervisors? If, do we prepare a letter, as you as chair, that you'll sign that these are our concerns? Because, again, we're an extension of them as a voice, but they don't come here, there's, chief of staff's not here. They need to hear,
So I'll bring to that meeting how we will communicate the results of this meeting to the board of supervisors.
Well, we've done that before.
Yes.
We physically showed up there and made our point known.
Okay.
And I think you've
So,
also written to them too.
I would even extend the offer to their staff, Board of Supervisor staff to attend.
okay. So the agenda items, so far we have 3, the EMS plan, the closest ambulance, we have the EMD, and Jerry, tell me what else we're going to agendize.
The other 2 items that I had brought up last month were lack of input from the fire chiefs. And I think that was, Mike has stated that several times today. And the other one was the definition or perception of medical control. And specifically, that medical control does not mean operational control.
So
Jody, you have the EMS communication policies, the 3,000
that will be
series.
part of the discussion, so we'll figure out how to agendize. So how about if the agenda item is how input is processed and input and feedback from board members, from the EMCC members. I know where we're going.
That works with the fire chiefs, then.
Yeah.
That works with
And
Dana.
then the definition of medical control and with the MD. Yeah? So I'm gonna, provided I'm pretty sure I can do this.
Jody, this will be
But I got, pardon?
an open meeting as well?
Of course.
Yeah.
This is an open meeting that we will post and everything. And so assuming that Susan clears me, I'm going to send out my email address to the committee members. If there is additional agenda items that you would like to see on the agenda that we haven't just discussed, to get it back to me within a week so that I can meet with the EMS agency and agendize everything and have everything out in a timely manner before the 22nd at 9:30.
So we have to send the agenda out, I believe it's 48 or 72 hours in advance.
So that'll be Wednesday, which is well for me.
So it would help me if you send me an email specifically identifying what agenda items you want on it.
Okay, I will do that.
And what I wouldn't do is have a circular email.
No,
right?
with
So-
that,
So
no.
just if,
Just add, you want to
Just to
add
you.
items.
Yeah, just to
me.
you.
And I will add, I will start with the items we've just discussed and send them to Mike so that staff can prepare it.
I know for ours, we put a note that says, please do not reply to all, if that's what.
I'll put that on there, do not reply to all. Yeah, we don't want to see everybody's stuff.
No, that's the Brown Act violation.
Do a blind carbon copy.
Okay, somebody's gonna have to train me, but there's somebody who can train me. Okay. Yes,
I'd like to remind the committee and the chair that this is a public meeting and everybody needs to speak loud and clear so everybody hears what's discussed.
President Week hears, suffers that.
thank you, so noted. All right, with that,
I have one more brief item.
yes,
This may just be applicable to me, but I'm concerned it could be a wider field, but I'm having difficulty with the RFP that was forwarded by email. I cannot open the damn thing. But I'm concerned that other people may have the same problem who might be interested in reading that RFP, and I think I'm
Can I
concerned
tell
about
you-
distribution.
Can we send it to you?
Yeah,
The download from our site.
I went to the website and downloaded it.
you go to the website and download it.
Go to
Okay.
the purchasing website to download it.
I actually
Actually,
do the same thing.
Google
Okay, that
ambulance
may be the
RFP, it
problem.
just
That-
pops right
okay,
up.
Thank you. Thank you.
and it's hard to find, and that's the bigger point, as Harry, you is a community representative. That's, he's a liaison to the community. If you haven't even opened the RFP yet, right?
I can't.
This is a grave concern because really you're the conduit. So I've had people tell me as well, it's very difficult to find. I think it was actually on the EMS homepage at one time, I thought.
It was.
And now it's, I
It
don't,
still is, we have a link, but it has to be on the purchasing website.
okay, yes,
Right, it's,
Yeah.
this is not, this is something purchasing does, and they control that document, not us.
It's on the City of Gonzalez's front page, item down the bottom, information, trying to get everybody to read it because it is so significant for our area.
So is it possible that we can have the EMS agency send out to the committee members the best way to get to the,
I would appreciate that.
I can tell you the best way right now, totally. It's on the county website, under departments, go to contract purchasing, and it's on the very first page.
And if you go to our website, there's a link that will take you directly there, mocoems.org.
and even easier, you can Google Monterey County EMS ambulance RFP, and it'll pop up. Okay.
That might be a problem.
We just went through next meeting, because it's not the next regular meeting. We are at adjournment. Is there any other good of the order before we adjourn?
I just have one, and it's about process, and I think you can sense the frustration of process. And at our last meeting, county council put a memo out about the RFP process, and I think even to the prior meeting that we tried to get some input from the state of California, even though they wouldn't put it in writing. We've been doing some research on other county ambulance RFP processes, and Stanislaus is one right now that is out. That process started with stakeholder input. It went to their EMCC as a draft document that the EMCC was allowed input, and then forwarded to the Board of Supervisors for approval. The state has approved that process. It's in the staff report, and so Solano is, to our understanding, did the same thing. We would just raise awareness that that is a very collaborative approach. The EMCC, that's why we're here. We represent community, physicians, field paramedics, law enforcement, city managers, fire. As a process, when it comes to here, we might not all agree, but boy, it sure makes the supervisors at least have outreach, and so we don't have a bunch of unhappy folks that are in our fire district right now writing the Board of Supervisors upset about the process. So again, I know it's an interpretation of, maybe our county council versus Stanislaus and Solano, but it frustrates me when the state approved their process and we're told that we can't do it down here. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at Stanislaus. You can Google the RFP. It's a great, transparent process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for the good of the order?
Just have a quick one. Perhaps a review of the bylaws or a modification of the bylaws to address the mechanism for adding agenda items should be included in there. That had we had that might have alleviated some of the discussion today.
Right.
It's also in the policy for this committee.
Pardon?
It's in the policy and procedure for this committee.
Okay.
I think it's 1010 or something, 1020. Yeah,
So,
it's all in there.
But you asked for a review, and I would like, would that be appropriate on the May agenda?
It wouldn't be a great thing.
Thank you.
I asked that we talk to county council too, because in the meantime, Google is a great tool. And I looked up what emergency, add to the agenda item, and it doesn't appear what she stated was what the civil code stated. So,
Okay.
Can you go to the code?
yeah, the code about adding things.
I have it on my phone, I can show you after.
No, I
With that, we are adjourned.